Happy Easter! The title of today's talk is Ascending Through Grace. I'm going to get into the Easter part. But first, let's start with this concept. We defy gravity. We defy the restrictions and the limitations of this life's experience when we ascend out of race consciousness into grace consciousness. So let me just, before we go any further this morning, let me just kind of give you an idea for those who don't know what race consciousness is. It's a term that we use a lot in New Thought. But it has nothing to do with an individual's race, color, ethnic origin, none of that. But it refers to accumulation, if you will, a collective unconscious of all the feelings, beliefs, values, attitudes, words, actions of the human race. And we're all a part of that. So we're all influenced by that collective unconscious. Unless and until, though, we can ascend into that grace consciousness, we stay controlled by the race consciousness, by all of them. You know it, you know the TV, you know what you're hearing. It's like we're subjected to all of this in our families of origin, in our groups of friends, perhaps, unless you upgraded your friends, so to speak. That's not nice, but sometimes you just got to upgrade. So today we're looking at moving out of a place in our thinking, our feelings, our beliefs, our values, into that controlled, which, you know, the unconditional controlled, because we are controlled by the unconditional as well as conditional thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, words, and action of the human race. So race consciousness is often, very often, based upon fear and lack and limitation and separation. Separation. If you aren't sure if this is true, as I said before, just turn on the news. And with each story that is on that news channel, see if it's coming from a place of love and openness, or is it coming from fear and lack and limitation. Pay attention, because that stuff is permeating our consciousness. It's permeating us. And what we know, what we do know, is that we are unconsciously affected by race consciousness until we deliberately bring a deliberate and conscious choice into the whole picture of bringing the divine into our lives, of really looking at divinity within us as us. Knowing that God is there. God is always present, because when we add that G to race consciousness, what do we have?
Grace. Grace.
We have grace consciousness, and that's what the whole talk is about this morning in a nutshell. To move out of race consciousness, which is lack, limitation, fear, and bondage, into a place of grace consciousness, which is open to that divinity within us, that God self within us, that is love, that is abundance, that is oneness. So love instead of fear, abundance instead of lack, freedom instead of limitation, and oneness instead of separation. And those ideas have the qualities of love, abundance, freedom, and oneness. And they pretty much sum up the essence of grace. That is what we talk about. That's what we want to live our lives in. We want to include that G. We want to really, well, I do anyway, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure you do too, or you wouldn't be sitting here listening to these talks, because we're in this together, folks. There's no separation. It looks like it when I look out, but there is an energy, there are superpowers that are higher selves that are connected to all that is, that are in operation right here in this room. I can feel them. So I am knowing that love, abundance, freedom, and oneness is the birthright of each and every person here. And as relayed through the words, of the angel at the tomb in the Easter story. We'll get into that. On this beautiful Easter morning, let us ascend through grace. I've been putting on Facebook a bit about crucifying our fear and ascending into love. That's what it's all about. Course of Miracles had it right, love and fear. So we crucify the fear and we ascend into love. That's where I want to be. But according to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 1 through 6, this is the story. We're going to take it apart a little bit. We're going to do kind of like a metaphysical interpretation of the last part of this short story. When the first day of the week began to dawn, there came Mary of Magdala and the other Mary to see the tomb. And behold, a great earthquake took place. For the angel of the Lord came down from heaven and went up and rolled away the stone from the door and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his garments were as white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards who were watching trembled and became as if they were dead. But the angel answered, saying to the women, "You need not be afraid, for I know that you are seeking Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, just as he had said." So the three ideas in the last two sentences of this passage are what I'd like us to explore this morning. Three ideas that speak to the concept of moving from race consciousness, beliefs in that fear, lack, limitation, restriction, into the grace consciousness, which is abundance, freedom, love, and oneness. Jesus' message of grace was for us. It was really this was a brilliant, probably one of the most brilliant master teachers that have ever walked this planet. He was teaching what we're talking about. He was teaching oneness. He was teaching empowerment. And some of the things that he said, well, no, we'll go into that later. Once again, well, let's go into taking apart a bit of that passage first. The angel answered, saying to the women, "You need not be afraid, for I know you are seeking Jesus who was crucified. He is not there, for he has risen, just as he had said." So there's 3 points I want to really take apart here. The first I am calling from fear to love. Even though the guards were watching, they trembled when they saw this angel, and they became as if they were dead. And you know that if you've ever been struck with terror, you can't move. It's like the deer in the headlights, you freeze. That is basically what the guards were. But the angel said to the women, "You do not need to be afraid." Why are we ever afraid? Do you find yourself afraid, anyone? Or is it just me? Maybe it's just me. Things come up, fear. The answer is always the same. No matter what the condition is fear. No, yes, it is. We are believing in two powers. We're believing in, we believe in God, and the other. So when we do that separate stuff, which we do, we're having a human experience. When we say that God and, if there's anything that follows and, that's where the fear is all tied up. That's where the fear is. F-E-A-R. And I know we've heard the acronym false evidence appearing real, but I have a new one today. Forgetting everything about reality. Now, reality I'm talking about is with the capital R, which means it's about the divine, it's about God, not the small r. Whenever we put something, a new thought, in capital letters, it's about the divine. So I looked up the definition of reality in Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind textbook. In the back there's a glossary of definitions. And this is what he wrote. Reality actually means that which is indestructible, incapable of decay. Reality is unchanging and everlasting. The self we see is what we have thought about ourselves, the form we have molded by our thought. The real self, is perfection, for God would not know anything unlike itself. Our sonship is reality, Christ abiding in us. The kingdom of God, which is reality, reality as concerning us, is that God is in us, as us, and is us. The truth is its oneness. There is not a power, we don't believe, there is a power that can sit over here and judge this one group of people. And then it gets really interesting, because then you have another God for this other group that sits somewhere and judges everyone. And then you have a heaven and a hell and an afterlife. That's not what oneness is about. It's about a God of love that loves all that it creates. And that supersedes all separate religions. Do you see how beautiful that is? There is no water fight, is there? If we all believed in the same oneness, which is unconditional love. God is good. That's the reality we forget about when we're in fear. The angel told the women at the door, at the tomb, you have no need to fear. In essence, the angel said, remember, there is only one power, and that power is for good. God the good. Don't pay attention to that which has no power. Fear is changeable. Fear has the power, we allow it to have over us. But when we develop the techniques and the faith to turn within, that's where our true self is. That is our eternal self. Jesus knew it. Jesus knew it. There was nothing to fear, because he was one with all that is. He was one with God. So how do we heed the angel's wisdom and turn from fear into that capital R reality? We turn to the opposite of fear. And the opposite of fear, according to the Course in Miracles and according to a lot of philosophies, is love. The opposite of fear is love. And here is a surefire way to get out of race consciousness-based fear. Simply think about someone, just to get a feeling of that vibration. Divine love is so much more than this, but think about someone that you love. Could be a friend, it could be a child, it could be a partner, it could be any of those things, and get that vibration of love. That's how we move from the fear into a place of love. So, lack and limitation to abundance and freedom. That's the second idea that was in that message, that quote from the Bible. So second, the message of fulfilled promises. He has risen just as he had said. He has risen just as he has said. We can count the promises that Jesus made, and he made a whole number of promises and articulated them in his ministry, because he was a minister. He traveled ministering to people and preaching to people. And some of the things, just some of the promises that he made, that he had come so that we may have life and have it more abundantly. Believe that or not? That God would provide for us even more than he provided for the lilies in the field and the birds in the trees. And you know they're abundant. They never want for anything. That our faith would make us whole, or said another way, that it is done unto us as we believe. That God was within us. The Father and I are one. He said that those miracles which he did, you also can do. The kingdom of God was at hand. And that's just to name a few. Doesn't that sound familiar? It sounds exactly like what we talk about every Sunday and what we study in our classes. And because he filled the mother of all promises, he will rise, right? Mm-hmm. He ascended. We can think, and that's all about immortality, because he knew there was no death. Ultimately, there is no death, because the divinity within us is immortal and is connected to the great I am. We are all part of that, each and every one of us. But these are some of the promises based on the essence of grace. Grace, abundance, and freedom, which is our message to get today. To be in an atmosphere of grace consciousness. And abundance and freedom become ours when we rely on the transcendent idea of all these promises, that God is within us. God is within us. There is no separation, only that which we believe is separate. But truly, there is not. We are, each and every one of us, a living expression of divinity, created out of that God stuff, out of the perfection, out of the good that is God. Which takes us to the third thing that the angel said. The angel said, he has risen. And we move into what is the relevance of resurrection to us. Aside from the profound teaching of immortality, there's another layer to that. And of course, as learned metaphysicians, as you are here, you know what that is. It's the idea of resurrection in consciousness. Rising up in consciousness. It is the idea that we can, right here and right now, rise above race consciousness. All the information that pummels us all the time, it is coming on every angle. If you don't watch TV and you have a computer, well, it's getting in on that computer. It's getting there. And it's part of the collective unconscious, so we don't always have to hear or see it. We are getting it. We're one. And you do this by believing that you are a living, you rise above it by believing that you are a divine expression of the one life. That divine self is you. And it is expressing individually and uniquely and beautifully as each and every person here. So let's test it with a quick exercise. I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, you are a perfect living expression of God. You are a perfect living expression of God. How did that feel? Pretty good. Felt good.
Expression of God.
Now say to that same person, I am a perfect living expression of God. I am a perfect living expression of God. Did that one flow as easy as the first one?
Expression of God.
Because sometimes people are not comfortable. We've been around this teaching for a while, so we're pretty comfortable with that recognition. But there are many people that would be very uncomfortable with saying that, because they're still afraid. A lot of religions, not all, but a lot are based in fear. We know this. And we want you to know that this religion, philosophy, spirituality, science is based in love. Pure love. There's no dogma. There are no rules and regulations. It's empowering, because we have to turn within to find the real truth. So what fear still needs to be crucified within us? Yeah. Got a few in your consciousness? Sure we do. If you're having this living experience, there's probably some fear that you would be better off if it was crucified. And what have you forgotten about reality? Calling that God. What have we forgotten? So I love this promise that Ernest Holmes wrote in his textbook. As the human gives way to the divine in all people, they become the Christ. And we know that Christ means the anointed one. It is not one person. It was a common term used many centuries ago. It's the anointed one. And that is the meaning of Easter for us this morning. As the human gives way to the divine, each and every one of us becomes the Holy One, becomes the Anointed One. Why not? Why not love ourselves? The more we love ourselves, the more we're practicing this spirituality. By loving ourselves. If we don't love ourselves, we cannot love anyone else. Cannot do it. Cannot. It's impossible. I do not believe that the second coming of Christ is when Jesus transcends or descends from heaven to draw to him the chosen few. It just doesn't even make sense, does it? Just a group of people over here, no matter what. If you believe what I say, then you will be saved. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't make sense to me when I was a child in Catholic school. It never made sense, which is why they didn't particularly like me in Catholic school. Margaret McCarthy always had a hand up. But Jesus said God is love. You know, why is Sister Agnes beating that child? You know, it goes on like that. It does. I mean, if you were in old school, I hear that it's gotten a lot better, so that's good to know. And we're not denigrating any. Everyone's religion is absolutely, if it fits them, if it fulfills them, if it uplifts them, that's great. But I can't wrap my head around, never could, one God for a certain group of people. That part never made sense to me. So I say let's be open. You can't be open at the top if you're closed in the humanity realm. So that second part of the coming of Jesus, when that really, what I think it really means is that when each and every one of us opens up our consciousness to the grace, to the love that we are, that's when true transformation occurs. That's when we move from fear to love, from lack to abundance, from limitation to freedom, and from separation to oneness. And it is in that realization that there is only one power, one presence, one love, one infinite possibility that is forever expressing itself in and through and as each and every person everywhere, no matter what it looks like. God did not just impart itself in one group of people, one country, one nation, and those at war over there who are our enemies, they don't have any God in them. Does that even make sense? Sorry, it doesn't. We are all, it's either all or none. It can't be some, it's all. That's why it's inclusive, and that's why forgiveness is so important, because always, if you think you have nothing to forgive, put on the news, as I said, you will find many things to forgive. You will find, if you're responding to anything that's being said, there's something in you that needs to be healed. So what I'm inviting all of us to do on this Easter morning is to rise up, to ascend to that place of kindness, of love, and to really to crucify anything that is harmful to our thinking, our well-being, and living this life, anything that is fear-based. And just to help you move along, I'm going to ask our practitioners to surround this room.